Welcome to another edition of the SprintCarUnlimited.com Deep Dive presented by EnTrust IT Solutions. Joining us on this week's show is car and track owner Mike Heffner of Leylands.com. Before we get to Mike, don't forget to check out EnTrust IT Solutions. EnTrust is a full-service technology company serving small and mid-sized businesses in New York, Pennsylvania, and surrounding areas. The staff at EnTrust takes a personalized approach to technology. See why customers are choosing EnTrust IT Solutions as their technology partner by scheduling a free consultation at www.entrust-msp.com or calling 717-292-8868. Now on to Mike Heffner. Mike, how you doing? And thank you to, I'm sorry. I'm still thinking of podcasts. Mike, thank you very much for being on the show, and we appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, Jeremy. Sorry, I'm fighting off a little bit of nasal infection, congestion, whatever you call it, but I wasn't even at an indoor race, and I got not feeling so good. So no Chili Bowl this year, no indoor racing, but I'm still sick.
Don't worry, my voice will probably crack 3 or 4 times. I've been doing my other YouTube stuff, and now it's just a big joke. I'm going to wear one of those robes, those, that they wear on the
suit.
Yeah, well, just no, I'm actually going to wear like one of those where they have the romantic music and the cigar and
yeah.
Miles Davis type.
Yes.
Look, I have a lot to talk about, and with you, you're a track owner, you're a car owner, we're at Selinsgrove. You pretty much done it all except drive in this sport. So first off, do you have any aspirations to do that?
I did when I was a kid. I looked at it, and that's one of the things that intrigued me about racing, that I thought I could do it, but I was always too chicken to try it. And, I did get in. We had a test and tune up at Selinsgrove one day for the Speedsters, and I got into Speedster. And, that was a couple of years ago. And, I drove it around. I was like, holy crap, I'm going fast. And I was like, holding on. And I came in, I'll never forget, Richie Tobias was there, and they had like 3 or 4 speedsters they were testing. And I came in, and Richie says, I never understand. People always want to drive these things, but when they do, they always go so slow. And, of course, he was talking about me, and I was putting around there, probably doing 40 miles an hour, thinking I was going to fly out over the fence. But it just gives me all the more respect for the guys that do drive them, because it really takes, it takes guts and it takes talent. So I have the utmost respect, but it's something at 54 years of age. I mean, I could get an itch and maybe get into something like a quarter midget, but I don't think you're going to see me in a full-size sprint cars.
I'd love to get in a legend.
Yeah, the legends seem fun. I'm one of those people, like I would get out there and just be scared that I would screw somebody else up. Like I know, if I was in a sprint car, there's a certainty I'm going to wreck myself, but I would hate to wreck somebody else. So maybe if I could be like the only one out there racing, then that way I could win the race too. One guy in it, and one guy finishes, one guy wins. That would be the only way I was going to win a race.
Well, you are competitive. I mean, I've known you for a while now, and I know how competitive you are. And I want to talk about what you do for a living outside of racing, which I'll get to, because your background is kind of interesting that you're sitting in front of. But we'll get to that in a minute. You actually got into sprint car racing as an owner at the end of 2008, I believe. Tuscarora 50. You had Ryan Smith in the car.
Yep. It was and it was funny the way it came about. Friend of mine, Jimmy Pasquarello, owned at the time I was sort of in the family. He was a relative of the woman that I was living with, and sort of got into was in his family, so to speak, in the family. And he used to help Scatzi and Fuso on his sprint cars here in Allentown. And we always used to joke. I used to say, Jimmy, I want to buy a sprint car. I'll buy one if you work on it. 2008, I don't know how it happened, but I bought a sprint car, a used sprint car and a used motor, and Jimmy started to work on it, and we took it out to the races. And poor old Ryan Smith was the first one to drive it. It wasn't pretty, and I'm sure it wasn't that. I'm sure it wasn't set up real well. But I remember the first night we went out, I was so I am competitive now, and I want to win, and qualifying isn't good enough. But then first race ever, owning a sprint car, we qualified for the night before the Tuscarora, and I think it was Ryan Smith's first time in a Fort Wings 410 car. So that was encouraging. Like that was really cool. So, but that was the first time ever.
It's good you had a good night because that put you on the path, so to
It
speak.
did. It did. I think it was like a couple weeks after that though, like, and it was our fault. The throttle linkage had stuck on Ryan at Lincoln, and that car that I bought was just turned into total junk. He's going down the backstretch, went into turn 3, and he just went for a ride. And I remember that night though too, because I was so dedicated to it at that time. I only had, maybe 5 or 6 races under my belt, but I wasn't discouraged by it. I felt bad. I felt bad for Ryan, bad for the team. But I remember that night, I walked over to Poncho's. Poncho's was racing with Doug Ash, and I said, "Do you have, like, our car's destroyed? Like, do you have a car at your shop ready to go?" They're like, "We got a brand new one in the showroom. It's got all the parts on it, everything." It's like, I'm taking it. I don't even think I asked the price. I just said, I'll take it. And we drove over there from Lincoln. The shop was 10 minutes away. And I think we loaded it up and took it home, and that was brand new J&J. I remember that, but I remember that whole night very vividly because and I was like, we don't have a spare of anything, so what are we going to do? And I want to continue on with this, so we went over there, and fortunately, I think I even had some cash in my pocket. I didn't pay the whole thing cash, but I gave him a little bit of cash, and then we went from there. So that was actually the car that won the first race for us,
Oh,
and
okay.
that was with Keith Kaufman, I believe, because he was a J&J guy, and that was the car we kept held over for the next year, and then Keith had won that race at Port Royal.
So before you actually get into ownership, what is your racing background? Just a fan? Or did you stumble on this late? What was your kind of foray into sprint car racing before actually getting involved in the ownership game?
I used to go to the races with my dad a lot, and I would say I was, elementary school, middle school, and we used to go to Grandview, which is not one of my favorite tracks, but we used to go there because it was close. It was like 20 minutes away. So we started going on a Saturday night with some friends, and it was pretty cool. Very dirty, I remember, as it
It
still is.
still
And
is.
yeah, and I would go there with my dad. Good experience. Good experience. Watching the modifieds, and then it was when I forget the guy's name, but he used to have sprint car open cockpit stuff almost every Sunday night. They'd have midgets and URCs on a Sunday night at Grandview. This is back in the 80s.
Okay.
So you could see a doubleheader show of URC sprint cars and ARDC midgets. I don't know if it was every Sunday, but it was maybe a Sunday or 2 Sundays a month. And we were like, holy cow, these are really cool. These go a lot faster than the modifieds. The racing is pretty cool. So we started going to those, me and my dad and some friends. And then we realized and read, and I don't even think my dad was aware that there was such a thing as Central Pennsylvania sprint car racing. So one night, and it was far, everything's 2 hours from here. Out in Central PA. So I don't know what the first track we went to was, but I remember in the early 80s going to Selinsgrove and just actually, let me digress a little bit. They had a 410 race at Nazareth at the old half mile. And it was they didn't run them much there, very rarely. And we went to that and saw it. They only had like 12 cars show up. And Keith Kaufman won in the Al Hamilton car. And we saw that, and that was like a whole different animal, than Grandview on the half mile. And then we decided to venture out to Central PA and started going to Selinsgrove and Williams Grove and Port Royal. And I just got the bug. But believe it or not, that was the 80s. And then high school, everything. And then I went to college, and then I started working in my career, and I didn't go for a while. Like there was a point in time, I probably skipped the races for close to 10 years. I had a child, started working. And then I got back into it in the mid 2000s.
You've had a pretty good list of drivers in that car. Darren Pittman, Lance DeWeese, obviously Greg Hodnett, Tyler Walker, I believe,
Yep.
was
Tyler
in
Walker.
your car.
Mhm.
Ryan Smith was back in it.
Yep.
You had some younger guys, Devin Borden. Now you have Troy Wagaman. You had Keith Kaufman. I mean, he was at the end of his career, but still,
Yep. Yep.
a
Keith,
huge name.
Shawn Michael, Kurt Michael. Yeah, a lot of championship caliber drivers, a lot of Hall of Famers, a lot of guys that I'm proud to say drove it.
Yeah, Shawn started out 2009, then Keith Kaufman got in it.
Right. Shawn got hurt at Williams Grove. Yep.
Correct. And then Keith Kaufman got in it. And then I believe after that it was Darren Pittman.
After Keith Kaufman was actually Tyler Walker.
Tyler Walker, that's right.
I was gonna set the world on fire with Tyler Walker, which, maybe it wasn't, in theory, it wasn't a bad idea.
No.
I saw this hot shoe from California and knew that he won some World of Outlaw races and was kind of like a cool guy. So yeah, I brought him, and that was quite the experience. I mean, it was probably some of the most. I remember my son related, and my son was like 12 at the time, or 11, and he related best to Tyler. Like he loved Tyler Walker because Tyler Walker was like no disrespect to Tyler. I haven't talked to him lately, but he was like a kid at heart. He was definitely still a kid at heart, and he was pretty fun to watch, but it didn't work out. And regardless, it not working out, it sucked for me and it sucked for him, but ultimately it paid huge dividends for me because him and Darren Pittman got into the car. Tyler went to the 17 car, to Jesse Keene's car, and that's why he left my car. And Darren was left rideless, and he came to my car, and I got the better end of the deal there. So
yeah, you've always been kind of close to Darren. It's somebody you get along with really well outside of, I would say, off the track, so to speak, outside the pit area. I know you're a big Darren Pittman fan.
Oh, I am, and believe it or not, we don't really talk that much. But he always picks up whenever I call him, the second ring. So he's one of those guys who I feel like he's always there to talk anything I need. We don't talk that much. I mean, I know I have a family, he has a family, and we live far away. But I've always admired him greatly because of his demeanor, his intelligence, his on track abilities, his off track, the way he's handled himself. He's always been super nice to me and my family, and that speaks volumes for him as a person. He's just a really good person. One of those guys who you would trust. Leave your house to him for a month, and you're going to come back, and it's going to be the same way it was when you left, but only probably better. So
I think you also helped him get the Casey Kane right, because I think he was rideless. He comes back here and he runs here. He was successful here, and I thought, I still believe it was the springboard to KKR, and then he wins the World of Outlaw Championship. Yeah. When he wins the World of Outlaw Championship, you had to feel really good about that, in that you played a small part in that.
Yeah, I was really happy for him, because he left on good terms. He was always very straightforward. He would always tell me, listen, if I really want to be in it annoyed me a little bit, but yet I admired it because he didn't hold back. He didn't lie to me. He didn't, he always made his aspirations known. He always told me, I'd do anything to be back in the World of Outlaws, or, we could just win like a $10,000 race at Williams Grove. And he's talking about being back with the World of Outlaws. But I understand that. And that's what makes him so great, because he had, a desire to compete at the highest level possible. And he did that. And, I remember when he won that, I was very, very happy for him. But a little bit of me felt like, like that could have been my car, or what if it would have been my car, win the World Outlaw Championship. I mean, that's like the top of the list. That's right up there with winning the Knoxville Nationals. But it worked out well. And Darren's smart enough. Darren's very smart, and he knows that, hey, there aren't too many owners out there, and he doesn't burn bridges. So
No.
I was actually kind of devastated last year, when not devastated, but I just felt awful, that he didn't, that he couldn't pocket that National Open, because that happened. Same thing happened in my car. We were going to win the National Open with like 7 laps to go, and it was like,
it's hard to watch. I mean,
yeah.
I felt bad, and I'm supposed to be neutral. I felt
Right.
bad for him.
Yeah. It just doesn't seem to be. I don't know. And then I called him a week or two later, because I didn't want to call him right away.
No.
And it's like, it is. He was very, very humble about it. Like, what am I supposed to do? There's nothing I can do. So, but it just that was heartbreaking. I remember that's probably the toughest in all my years of racing thus far. That was the toughest one to swallow ever. Was because we had the car that night, and we had I remember Jason Myers had like there were 3 or 4 restarts. Doug Esch, I remember, flipped and hit the bridge that night late into the feature. It was like lap 31, then another restart, and then finally there was a single file restart, because there were so many restarts, and that's what did us in, because Myers could move around then behind Darren and saw where Darren was going to go. And if they just would have continued on with the double files, would have been fine. But it wasn't meant to be. But that's the one that sticks with me the most out of any. That we, the one that we should have had.
So I believe you have Lance Deweese. Or somebody in between there.
Darren left to go to the
9
car, and then I think it was Lance. Yeah.
Now, at this point, you have one of the best cars. It didn't take you long to have one of the best cars in the area.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a tribute to you and the people you have with the team. And Lance is one of the best drivers of all time in Central Pennsylvania.
Yes.
You guys were consistent, but you just couldn't win. And as I've said many times, I try and tell people, you could have the best of everything, and sometimes it just doesn't work. And for some reason, it just didn't work.
Yeah, it wasn't even. I remember Matt Kramer was turning wrenches, and Matt was a good hell of a good guy, really good, smart guy, and he had worked with Lance, and I don't know, it just doesn't work. That's one thing I learned in sprint car racing: 2 and 2, most of the time it equals 3, and you just have to accept it. It doesn't make any. It defies all rules of reason. But 2 and 2 most of the time equals 3. And when you get 2 and 2 to equal 4, that's when you got a team that's going to win races. But most of the time, and there's no explanation. You just can't. It just doesn't. It's not something. No, it's not an algorithm. It's nothing you put in your computer and figure it out. It's nothing that you can add up. It just doesn't add up, and you just have to accept that. And Lance, I'm happy for Lance too. He went on, and went with the 69 car and had some great runs, great wins, and it just didn't work out. Like, you could take Donnie Schatz and put him, or Steve Kinzer, and put him with Ricky Warner, and it just wouldn't work for some reason, and you couldn't figure it out. So
2 + 2 = 4 with your next guy. And there I have a couple questions about hiring Hodnett, because you hired my co-host on the podcast, Ryan Hand.
Yes.
Okay, you got Greg. What made you take a chance on Ryan? And because he wasn't a big name crew chief, why did you go that direction?
I think, again, it comes down to personality and knowing, that Ryan was a hard worker and a good person. I think sometimes you have to put that good person thing ahead of everything else sometimes. And I used to see Ryan at the races with Zemco, and Ryan used to make me laugh. And if you can make me laugh, like that's a really good thing. Also, one, be nice to my family. Two, make me laugh. And Ryan did both those things. On top of being, a very conscientious, very hardworking, very dedicated crew chief. So I knew him. I got the feeling, I deal with a lot of people, a lot of different people. And since I had known him, for 4 or 5 years or whatever it was, not known him, not like best of friends known him, but just known him, seen him in the pits. Um, I get the feeling that this is a good guy. This is a good guy. And so we approached him, and I remember talking to Greg for the first time. I don't like to step on anybody's toes. I'm not saying I never have, because I have. I've been stupid plenty of times in my life, and I've stepped on toes, and I've said stupid things. I've done stupid things, but I try to do the right thing most of the time when I can make my brain, work right. So, John Trone, another super guy in racing. I remember he was thinking about stepping back. I heard that. I called John first before I called Greg, and he said, "Yeah, give Greg a call, because I don't know how much racing I could do next year." So I called Greg, and I was so intimidated to call him, because I always used to see him walking around the pit area. And I was like, that guy is the grumpiest guy in the pit area. Like, he doesn't even look up. He doesn't acknowledge anyone. He just walks with his head down. And he always seemed like he was mean. And I called him, and he answered the phone. And I think it's the first time, other than maybe saying, like,
Yeah.
at the racetrack, "Hey, how you doing?" Because I don't even know. I mean, he knew who I was. I knew who he was. But it's the first time I ever really talked to him. And we talked for like 2 hours. And it was like, this is not the same guy that I see in the pit area. This guy is like incredibly intelligent, like incredibly driven, like a super nice guy. And it was crazy. It was really crazy. So, from then on, I knew that he was my guy. And I had always admired his driving. I mean, how can you not? I just see him on the track, and he was one of those guys, like, when Lee and him were together with the Apple
Yep.
car. Well, he made everything go that he was ever in, but I don't know. He was beating us when I had Pittman driving. And I was standing in the infield there at Port Royal in turns 3 and 4, and we'd be leading, and Hodnett would pass us. And I was like, God damn, that guy must be cheating, because I'd be standing in there in the turn, and he come in so smooth
Yep.
into the corner, and he just drift right through the middle. It sounded like the motor wasn't even running. And he would but that's how good he was. Like, people don't understand. Like, he didn't ever cheat. He didn't need to cheat. He was so good. That's how most of these guys are that get accused of cheating. They're just that good. And it's hard to really comprehend until you see it, until you're right there with it. And he did the same thing in my car, up at Port Royal. There were some seasons where we won, eight, 7, 8, 9 races in a season up there. And I used to just look at him in awe, like the way that he could make that thing work. And it wasn't with brute force. He wasn't up there banging it off the wall. He was driving it, with a soft foot. Like, he was just
Yep.
pedaling that thing so well, and just had such an understanding. I think that's where his engineering background, he would think about these things. You could tell he would think about them all the time. How do I get those tires to get more grip on the racetrack? How do I work my foot and the throttle to make and he would talk in such technical terms. I mean, you can ask Roach, like, he come in and he would tell us, well, the right front's up in the air about 1/2 inch, but I need to get the left rear down. That thing was up, in turn 2, that was up about 2 inches. And we need to, so he could tell you, and it would drive Roach nuts, I think, sometimes, because he would get so technical, and he knew he wasn't making the stuff up. Like, he could actually feel it, and he knew what was going on with the geometry. That's like how smart he was with the race car. So It's
I
cool.
know I interviewed him once and I said, Greg, dumb it up a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
We're not in class. We're not
Yeah.
at Memphis State. Just,
Yeah. 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 He was incredible person. Incredible.
and one, I think the other thing is I can honestly say there's very few guys that I go to talk to every time I'm in the pit area. He
Mhm.
was that guy.
Yeah.
And you could talk to him
Yeah.
about mountain biking. You could talk about sprint car racing. He'd come up to me and ask me, at that time I covered the NFL. So he'd come up and he'd say, well, what do you think about this quarterback out of Memphis State? And, Patrick Lynch, who ended up with the Broncos. He was in tune with, you could just talk to him about anything. And he was so likable.
He was as a person, and he cared about this sport more than anyone I've ever known. I'll give you two instances. And I think I'm not going to be scared to use his name because he told me this, and it's something. Bob Miller talked to me numerous times, and he would tell me how Greg would, if it didn't look like Bob had a good crowd at one of his shows, or
Yep.
it did, or if there was bad weather, or Greg was the first one to call him and say, Bob, did you do all right? Like, did things work out? Are you okay? That's how many guys that do that? I don't know any, but
Nope.
that was, Bob said that's the first call he would get from Greg, because Greg was he was concerned about, because he knew that this sport isn't just drivers, it's the fans, it's the tracks, it's the people who work at the tracks. There's a multitude of personalities that go into this thing, and they all have to come together and work as a team. If the fans aren't coming to the track, the track is going to have a problem. If the track is not having races, the fans are going to have a problem because they have nothing to watch. If it goes on and on, but there needs to be that synergy. And Greg understood that. And the second thing with Greg is, one time somebody did something stupid and wrecked us. And it was a younger guy, no names, but it was a younger guy. And I remember that he came down to the trailer to apologize to Greg. And I thought Greg was going to haul off and hit him, which is kind of what,
Yeah.
I wanted to do. I would have, but, I saw him talking. And after the conversation, I went over to Greg. I said, why didn't you punch him in the head? And Greg goes, he's young. He makes mistakes. And, I was at that point at one time. But that was Greg. That was how he viewed things. And it's hard to find anyone like that. Like, it's hard, really hard. There's no one. I don't think there will. And the thing is, I like talking about this stuff because people don't know all the aspects. I mean,
Right.
most people come up to me and say, they miss Greg. He was a great person, but knowing him that well and seeing these things happen in real life, like, made him all the more special to me. So that was him. I can attest to it. I can put my hand on the Bible and tell you that's the way he was.
No, it was. I had many conversations, really just nothing to do with racing. You know, I hate to bring it up. Obviously, September 20th, 2018. I know where I was. I know where I was standing. Obviously, that's the night Greg lost his life at Babs Motor Speedway. For you, you weren't just an owner to him. You were a friend. Uh, Somebody who was very important in your life. I can't even remember if you were there that night. I just can't because
No,
I
I was not
remember
there.
I remember certain
Yeah.
things. What I can't imagine if you can put into words, what was that whole thing like, even in the days afterward? It had to be so hard, not just because it happened in your car, but because it was a friend. He was a friend. I mean,
Mhm.
somebody you looked up to, the whole gamut.
Well, I could say it was definitely the absolute worst thing. I've had a very good and fortunate life. The people around me have their health, and I can definitely say that and I don't like talking about it because I don't like talking about how it affected me, because there are more important people to Greg, and there were people that were, Greg's family, for
Obviously.
instance,
Yep.
so I was just a small part of his life, but it affected me. It was absolutely the worst thing that I've ever been through. And you know, we all go through bad things, but I just was very sad and for his family, and tried to make reason of these things. And again, it's very hard to do. And I put my faith in a higher power and in the Lord and a God, and I would think that he's up there and he's looking down and he's smiling. And I think Jeff Swindell said it best. Greg didn't pass away in a sprint car. He lived in a sprint car, because this is something he truly loved to do, and he was a master at it, master of the craft. And of all, he left so much good in this world, especially in the sport we love. Like he did so much, um, that I think his impression on the sport will last forever. It transcends him, his earthly self, his spirit, and the things that he did. They will go on forever. And I think that's the way that he won it. So I just sort of just try to be at peace the best I can with it, and know that he's in a better place, and look at all the positive things that the safety aspects, and
Yeah.
the things that have been implemented since his passing. I mean, Greg saved. I was at Seals Grove one night as a promoter, and No Tracks used to have the water bottles, the water containers in front of the and one of the 305s wrecked into one of the head on into one of the water containers. The water container went in, and the driver did have a broken leg, but there's a life right there. I know that the life wouldn't have been saved had it not been for those water barrels. And the reason those water barrels were there was because of Greg. So, he saved countless lives in the past years, and will continue to do so. So, I always I think about Greg every single day of my life. Every single day. There's not one single day that goes by that I don't think about him. And you know, I don't, because I have, I have a lot of my racing memorabilia around the
Yeah.
house, and it's a lot of pictures of him. It's a lot of trophies that we won, that he won, and things like that. So, but I like having them there as a reminder, because I don't want to ever forget about him, and I never will.
Did you think about getting it out of racing?
I gave it very, very serious consideration. I mean, I was on the cusp. I was right there teetering on getting out. I didn't know what to do, really. Um, and had conversations with a lot of different people, a lot of people who I respect very much. And, one of them being Darren Pittman. Darren's been through some traumatic experiences too in racing. And, ultimately I decided that I think, and I would never want to project, but one of the things, that kept bouncing around in my mind is, and I think I had even talked to some of Greg's family about this, what would have Greg wanted, and he was so good for this sport, and meant so much to it, and would want it to continue to thrive, that I thought, what, if it would be okay with him, I think I'll go. I think I'll go on and keep racing.
You did that, and you got Ryan Smith in the car,
Mhm.
which was a tough act to follow for Ryan, I think.
Yeah, there was a lot. There was a lot of pressure on Ryan, and I look back and I put too much pressure on Ryan. Ryan's a good kid, and certainly talented. But that was a really tough situation for him to be in. And no matter who got in, it was just an emotional time. It was, it was just, it was tough. It was like, Ryan, we had some good runs. Ryan had some good
Yeah.
runs, and he did well, but it wasn't near the standards that I was looking for, and it was too much for me to put on Ryan. It was definitely, I definitely take some of the brunt of the blame there, because Ryan, Ryan had another job. Ryan was not a full-time racer. Real good kid. I mean, terrific kid.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
you couldn't ask for a nicer young man, and good people around him too. But it didn't work, because I had my expectations set too high. I put too much, maybe not directly, but indirectly, I put too much pressure on, and it just wasn't the right situation.
Well, I do want to, I'm gonna, your background there, you mentioned memorabilia. What the hell's in the background there? I see it looks like a fur
That's
coat.
yeah. I'm moving. That's Terry Funk's fur coat. Terry Funk, the wrestler. That's his fur coat, and these are all wrestling, professional wrestling costumes. That's another one of my hobbies, addictions. Professional wrestling. I love it, and I love collecting professional wrestling memorabilia. My business Leland's deals in sports memorabilia, but I collect sports memorabilia. But in the past 10 years, I put together a collection of wrestling memorabilia and ring worn outfits and things like that. And that's my thing now, collecting wrestling stuff. So they're in my basement because I'm moving some stuff around, and now I have about, I don't know, I'd say 300 costumes of professional wrestlers hanging in the basement. Yeah.
So I'm gonna bring up a source. It's not a source subject. I don't like the guy probably any more than you did. Guy Webb called you a baseball card salesman. Now, look, I'll take the brunt of this one. Guy Webb's not my favorite guy. So,
Yeah.
that being said, you're not a baseball card salesman. Um, Leyland's.com. You mentioned sports memorabilia. Uh, you you've been on ESPN. You sold, I believe it was, what was it, Babe Ruth? Was it a jersey?
Yeah, Jersey. Yeah, we actually did we sold Barry Bonds' 73rd home run ball on live on ESPN.
Yeah, you're not you're selling some major league memorabilia, but you're also considered one of the top guys in this field. First off, when did you get into memorabilia, and how do you become this guy who's so respected in your industry that you're on ESPN? I mean, to a guy like me who's a sports nut, uh, you're pretty. I mean, to you, you're just Mike Heffner, but to me, you've done a lot. You're one of the top guys. How do you go from starting in that field to where you are now?
Well, I'll try to make this quick, but it's a very interesting story, because I grew up in a small town in Topton, Pennsylvania, which is near Kutztown. I went to high school where there's 100 kids graduated in my senior year, and never had like aspirations of doing anything big. I went to college for criminal justice. I was going to become a
Oh,
state policeman, believe it or not. Yeah, never worked a day in the field of my life. I did do an internship with the police department, um, but that was never really an option for me. I went to college to get a degree. I had already known what I was going to do. I was going to deal in sports memorabilia, because my dad was very big into baseball. When I was a kid, I grew up on baseball and started collecting baseball cards in 1975 when I was 6 years old. And then in 1979, um, that was part of the story. Most kids collect baseball cards.
sure.
1979, the first price guide comes out, and I was 9 or 10 years old when it came out, and I decided I wanted to become an entrepreneur. And there were people at markets that I went to with my parents and stuff that were selling baseball cards, or older baseball cards at the time. And I decided, hey, look, this is worth 5 cents, and I can get it for a penny. And literally, that was what we were talking back then. It was
Yeah.
10-cent cards. Some cards were the best cards were $100. So I started to like pick up not just packs. I started to buy like individual cards from these smaller dealers that were set up at markets and the like, and started making money. I remember counting my money one time when I was like 11 years old. And because I grew up in a very modest household. My mom was a stay-at-home mom with me and my sister, and my dad worked at a foundry. He was a pattern maker.
Yep.
And I remember counting my money one time after selling some cards, and I had in a little box, and I had $6, and I was like, holy cow, I have $6, that I made from selling baseball cards. So that was like when I was, 10 years old, 11 years old, whatever. But it was like, that was a lot of money to me at the time. And then I started to go around once I could, my dad used to take me around to different shows. And then once I could drive, I started doing even more. And I met the guy who would become my business partner, Josh Evans, who founded Leland's. He used to be based in Allentown. So when I was in high school, I used to sell him stuff. I used to go around to different markets, pick stuff, and then take it to him. He was a national dealer, so he sold it to the public, or to the national public, in national publications, national trade shows. And then I made some like real money back then. I would go to, Renninger's antique market. Remember one time I bought a stack of 1910 tobacco cards. One of my first big deals, I paid $1 a piece for them, and I knew they were a lot better than that. And I sold them to Josh for it was either 1,000 or 1,100 bucks. I made $1,000, and like in 1984 or 85 or 86, that was a lot. So I started saving with the money I was making for college, and then I went to Kutztown University, put myself through school with my own money that I made through selling baseball cards, baseball memorabilia. And while I was in college, Josh Evans, the founder of Leland's, he had me working. I was working with him during the summer, and went out to shows in California and Pittsburgh and Cleveland. With him, or sometimes alone. He trusted me enough, my instincts, to know, what to do at the shows, what to buy, what to sell. And then when I graduated from college with a criminal justice degree, he offered me a full-time job, and that was working in New York City, and that was in 1992. And it started out, I could have made by going off and becoming a state cop. I could have made, I think at the time, the starting salary was like 25 grand, and he offered me 40,000 a year to work at Leland's, and I took it. I knew that that's what I was going to do. Like I knew all throughout my college years, because it's something I loved and enjoyed, and it is like it's a treasure hunt every single day, because new stuff would come up. And I guess I had some people, I guess is like driving a sprint car, like some people, or wrestling, what we were talking about earlier. Some people have the natural ability to do these things. And I think one of my natural abilities, I don't have many, but is to evaluate this material and tell if an autograph is good, tell if bad is game used. And because I love doing it, and if you love doing something, you learn it even more quicker. So I became started working, was traveling, actually commuting. I was on the road like 6 hours a day, because it took me 3 hours door to door to go to the office in New York and then come home. And I did that 5 days a week. And I did that for 8 years, but it was in my 20s, so I could do it. My body allowed it. I could never do it now, but and then just worked my way up, and ultimately became Josh's business partner in Leland's. And we had a hell of a run. We did really well, sold some big items. And but if I look at it from the time when baseball cards and things were selling for $1, $10, I went from selling things as a kid to selling things now, or in the past decade, for $10 million. So it's doing this, you're doing the same thing. It's the same exercise. Basically, you're going out, you're finding the material, you're taking it and you're selling it, and you're making a profit. But it's just on a much more grandiose level that I'm doing it now. So
What's the biggest item you've sold? Is it the Babe Ruth jersey? Is that the biggest thing?
I'm trying to think. We did handle the Babe Ruth jersey a couple times actually. There were a couple times that we handled the Babe Ruth jersey, and that was I can't. I probably have an NDA with the about the final price, but I can tell you
That's fine.
that the Babe Ruth jersey did sell for um eight figures. I mean, the highest thing
Yeah.
we've ever sold, is over $10 million. There've been some things that, a lot of people don't know, like what goes on behind the scenes, and not everything goes through auction, but there have been items in this industry that have approached $20 million, which is pretty insane. Single items. Auction record, I think, is 12 million for an item, but there have been items that have sold privately for higher than that. So it's real stuff. And unfortunately, I've loved it throughout my life. I've been really blessed, and I count my blessings every day. And it's allowed me, because believe me, if I wouldn't have the backing, Leland's is also a sponsor, which is great.
Yeah.
It's me, but it's Leland's, and we have gotten some business out of it. It's not all just for show. So, people have seen the Leland's on the cars from far away too, and called Leland's and said, "Hey, I saw you guys are into racing." If it wasn't for Leland's, though, if it wasn't for being blessed to be able to do what I do, there's no way I could afford racing. I mean, it just would be out of the question if I would have become a law enforcement officer.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, no way. No. This is this has become a sport, unfortunately, that is not for the weak checkbooks. And that is kind of unfortunate. I would like to see it become less expensive for the sake of everybody. It should become less expensive, but I don't think we're headed in that direction anytime soon.
I have that Doug Wolfgang helmet still. Just saying.
And I made you an offer.
Oh, come on.
I'll still buy it. I'll still buy it.
Ooh. Money isn't that tight yet, but
all right.
Yeah. But because you weren't satisfied just being a car owner, that wasn't bad enough for you. You had to go into promoting.
Yes.
And Sealands Grove, you got involved with Sealands Grove with Alan Kreitzer at the end of 2015. Obviously, we're there, started in 2016. What was that experience like? Sealands Grove, I get asked about Sealands Grove a lot, and I think there's a lot of bad luck that happens to Sealands Grove. It's almost like it's on an Indian burial ground. I feel like it's
a tough place.
Yeah, it is a tough place, but you made it go at it for quite a while up until 2022, the end of 2022. Mm-hmm. What was that experience like? Because then you're not done yet. You bought into Lincoln.
Yes.
Where you own it, whereas you leased Sealands Grove.
Yeah, the Sealands Grove thing, I have a lot of fond memories from childhood. One of which being I got struck by lightning up there in like 1985.
Okay, wait, time out. You got to tell me that story.
Yeah. It wasn't a direct hit, but I got knocked on my ass. I was there with my dad, and it was probably about 1984, 85. And this big thunderstorm comes through, and we're sitting not in I don't think we were in the grandstands. I think we were in the smaller bleachers. So everybody goes running for their car, and my dad and I went over to it was the pizza stand then and pizza stand now, and sort of stood under the awning over there, and pouring rain, thunder, lightning, and I'm there holding on to or leaning against the chain link fence with the tin on it, and there was a lightning strike. I never experienced anything like it in my life, and I didn't even know what happened. It knocked me, but I guess my body, I was young enough. It wasn't a direct strike, and but it was the weirdest experience I've ever been through. And
that would be one of the.
My dad knew at the time what had happened. It just happened so quick, and nothing like that since then. But that happened to Sealands Grove.
That might be one of the dumb things you said you did earlier. Grab the chain link
fence.
Well,
I mean, it wasn't even like, yeah, but I've done things I didn't even know was dumb at the time. I've done dumb things knowing they were dumb things. I've done them.
Okay.
So
Oh,
that
that's
was one
good.
of the innocent dumb things I've done.
You found out.
I've done some not so innocent dumb things. Yeah, yeah, I found out that was a dumb thing. But I was okay. I mean, I think that they didn't even have to take me to the hospital. So
Well, that's good.
I didn't
But
get burned. I didn't get burned either. So, because it wasn't direct, it wasn't a direct hit. Um, but yeah, I love Selinsgrove. I love the area. Um, and when that became, when Charlie Page was stepping back from it, I got together with Alan, and Alan turned out, that's one thing from the whole Selinsgrove experience. Alan's become someone I consider a great friend and a mentor. I mean, anything, I realize that Alan Kreitzer, another great person in racing. I mean, Alan and Alan, we can bust on Alan all the time. I love busting on
yeah,
him. He's just he's just a really good guy. And Alan's, we all have our quirks and everything, but Alan and I get along, I think, so well. And, so Alan was a great help. So was Steve Inch. I mean, another great person. And if you ask me, all the good things that I've taken away from Selinsgrove, they're all friendships, all people that I met up there and through there that I came away, we don't no longer run the speedway, but I still have those relationships, which mean the world to me because I don't have that many friends. And those guys, some of those guys up there, Alan, Steve, Brian Scandal, Todd Benner, all the people I met that without having the speedway or running the speedway, I never would have met or known as well as I do now. So I look at it as a total win for me. Even if it wasn't a financial win, it was a win in spirit. And so it was actually, Selinsgrove was a lot of fun, and I'll be the first to tell you, I miss it. I really do. It, I The people were great people that worked with us. This from the concession stands to the officials, the flaggers, everybody. And I guess I miss those people because some of
right.
them I don't see or talk to a lot, and they become your family. I forget how long we were there. I think it was 7 years.
16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So it was like
7.
7 years.
Yeah, about 7 years. So, I miss the people, and I miss the facility a little bit too.
Mhm.
I certainly want it to do well. We can't lose another racetrack, but like you said, there have been some really smart people who have run Selinsgrove and
Yes.
can't make it work. And there's just something about it. The area, the distance from major
Yep.
cities, there's just a lot going against it. The facility, I love the track. I mean, the configuration of the track, yeah, it's big, but I just love it. I mean, people say it should be made smaller, but then it loses all its identity.
It's
You
true.
know, it's like, should you make Port Royal smaller? It's the same size. No, because it loses all its identity. Um, if you want to make a track smaller, go out and build one. That's what I say. So, but no, Selinsgrove was a good experience overall, and it taught me a lot. I learned a lot through the people that I worked with there, and for the most part, yeah, there was a lot of aggravation. There was a ton of
Oh,
aggravation.
I
But
talk I talked to you about some of that aggravation,
oh my word, I was pulling my
it's,
hair out almost every week. But it also was very challenging, and I like a challenge, and it certainly was a challenge. And we kept the way I look at it, we kept it going.
yeah.
We kept the heartbeat going. It needed some reviving, and I feel like we kept it going and did the best we possibly could with it. And now it's someone else's turn.
It was definitely a labor of love, and I only have a couple more questions for you because I could keep you for 2 hours because I find you interesting. But you're part owner at Lincoln with Jerry Parrish and Scott Gobrecht. You still own your car. Troy Wagaman, Troy Wagaman Jr., who I thought was a good pick in that car. And him and Ben Angle have gelled really well. They had finished strong at the end of last year, 3 wins, and they've already gotten a win this year at Lincoln. I like that. I like it. One of the guys I've actually said could make a lot of noise this year. When you were just an owner, I mean, how much have you learned about the business side of racing? And are there some things now that maybe you didn't understand as an owner of your car that now you understand more about the sport from a promoter standpoint, just because of all the experience you had at Sealands Grove and now Lincoln? Are there things you appreciate now that you maybe didn't appreciate before?
Yeah, I mean, I like looking through, on both sides of the fence. I like being on both sides of the fence, because I think for me, I'm just I try to learn as much as I possibly can, because I feel like a better, by being a better promoter, track owner, whatever you want to call it, I can become a better sprint car owner and vice versa. There are things that you see that need to be done, but what a lot of people don't understand is a lot of this stuff is out of our control. It's just it's sprint car racing is governed by a larger body than Central Pennsylvania, and we're sort of just there. We're along for the ride, and we benefit from some, and we lose from some, and sort of going with the flow. The one thing I really did learn from the ownership and promotional aspect is that it's not easy. I mean, we have Steve O'Neill up at Port Royal, full-time job. He does his labor of love. I think they do pretty good. Lincoln, is Jerry's now, I think, retired from his job. So Jerry's general manager down there, part owner. And he puts his heart into it. He really, does. And Scott owning BAPS, being another owner down there. But Scott has a full-time business. I have a full-time business. So you look at the ownerships of these racetracks, and you can go throughout the country and do this. And most of the people that own racetracks also have other businesses or full-time jobs. And people don't understand that owning a racetracks are no longer, I don't know if they ever were, because I wasn't around doing it. This is one thing I should talk to Alan about. But the history of the money flow in racetracks, where racetracks are not easy to operate any longer. Maybe they were before television or before the internet, but we're going up against a lot of very difficult, a lot of adversities. And one of those adversities is people on the internet, bashing racetracks. So, people just don't get. That's one thing I try not to get too intertwined in social media. I try not to look at it a whole lot, but it's like a train wreck. I gotta peak sometimes, and I get a real kick out of it. Like everybody's talking about, not just Lincoln, they're talking about Port Royal and criticizing and this and that. And I just like to pose the one question to people: if racetracks are so damn profitable and they're such big gold mines, then why aren't people building them all over the place? Like, like, why is it that people are closing racetracks? When's the last time you saw a new racetrack, dirt track, sprint track, modified track open? When? I can't think of it. And don't tell me it's because of zoning, because people own hundreds of acres that they could build them on. It's not zoning. It's not environmental issues. It's because they aren't winners. We do it because we love it. If you make money one night, great. You know what? The following week, when you have a crappy crowd and it's called it's 50-50 forecast, you lose all that money. So I was just asked that people become more appreciative of what's around them and be a little less critical on racetracks, because it's not all a pot of gold. I mean, there's some good races. Tracks do very, very well some nights with their big races, but what happens when those big races get rained out, or they get pushed to a rain date, or it's they're calling bad forecast. So people just have to have a consideration. Like I said before, fans, this is all one big team that we're on. We're dirt track racing fans, owners, promoters, workers, journalists. So we're all we all love one thing. So let's try to, as a community, support each other.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, I know, well, at one point or another, I've been critical of every track. I've been critical of myself,
Well,
but
you're a journalist. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Like me, yeah,
yeah. I mean,
you will own it.
if I was wrong, I will own it. I know this from going in the '80s, and it just shows I'm old. Is you could open the gates and they would just come in. You can't do that anymore because if it's 40%, 50% chance of rain, now that if you have, and I'm going to say flow or dirt vision, where you pay a lump sum to view for the year, you're losing them.
Right.
And then there's some people out there who will blame the track and say, well, you're not doing enough to make them want to come. No, there's so many big races now, they can be selective.
Yes.
And you could roll out Jennifer Aniston on the front stretch and it's not going to matter.
Yep.
It's if you have a bad forecast.
Yep. There's so many, like I said, there's so much going against the tracks these days.
Yes.
There are no bonuses coming up for us. They're only, the negatives. And we have to fight those things. And when it's like when you're fighting one thing, when you're fighting one battle, sometimes you lose sight or can't concentrate on the other things that you can make your track better with. So people don't understand that you have to focus on something. If you're going to focus on combating one thing and then something else comes up, you have to finish out the fight on the one thing and then move to the next thing. So there's a lot of strategy involved. It's not all promotion. I do agree that I think the tracks need to do more to get people involved. I think we have to go beyond the racing because racing's great and that's why we go to the track, but having a little bit something else at the tracks for people, for kids, and for even wives of fans, girlfriends of fans. Some people that go to the track don't necessarily want to go to the track, but they go along with their significant other or their parents, and we have to try to make the experience more pleasant for them too, and hopefully gain them as fans so they want to go along every week. So there's definitely things that tracks can do, and everybody's out there trying to brainstorm on what those are. But like I said, with the keyboard, the internet warriors, well, you know what, you want to make things better, and you want your tracks to survive. Why don't you go volunteer to do some of these things? Volunteer for the kids' night. Volunteer to hand out stuff. Volunteer to go around to businesses and get them to hand out door prizes and things for kids. Do something. Don't just sit there and complain about it.
That's actually a good point. Last thing, then I'll let you go. You have a new son.
Yes.
You're 54.
Yes.
Look, I'm 52. Yes. I can't say much, but and you're in way better shape than I am. So, which I got to change, but that's another story. How long do you do this? How long do you, I mean, I know it's a labor of love, and I know you're addicted to sprint car racing. I know that. But how long do you continue to be an owner of a car and to be an owner of a racetrack and just be so engulfed with sprint car racing with so many outside things as well? Because let's face it, your business is demanding, and you also have a family. So where are you at with that?
I feel like I'll know it when the time comes. It's not here yet. But it's become such a big part of my life. And like I said, I would miss the people so much. I mean, we have a good community of people. As much as they bitch on the internet, we have a good community. I made so many friends. I mean, I 90% of my friends now are in racing. They're not necessarily in memorabilia or the people down the street. They're in the racing community. So I would hate to leave that behind. And but on the other hand, I couldn't spectate. There's no way after owning a car, there's that adrenaline, that I'm sure drivers get it too. But there's an adrenaline watching that car go around, and I'm sure the same. I never asked like Ben, like crew members and stuff, but I would imagine it's even the same for them. When you have something invested in that race car out there, like the adrenaline, the rush is amazing. Especially when you win. And
Yeah.
at this point, I'm not in it to finish 10th. I mean, that and God bless the people that are, because there are people, and those people make our sport go. Thank God there are people out there that do this as a hobby.
Yeah, I was
When
going
you're
to
spending that kind of money, it's hard to do it as a hobby, but there are people that are content with that. And I love those people, because that's the backbone of racing. But I'm not one of those people anymore, and I'm not content with it. And I get really ornery and upset when we don't do well. So I think if there ever came a time where like there was no chance of winning any longer, like I would say I would hang it up. There has to be a good chance of it, not just a 1 in 50. And as far as the promotional, the ownership, I like being involved in that too. Again, good people down at Lincoln. I would never know Scott or Jerry as well as I do now, and I consider them friends. I guess I'll just know it when the time comes, or when the well runs dry.
when the well.
But I do also, like I said, Leland's is a sponsor, and that's a major help. But I do actually I have a personal collection of memorabilia, and I do, when I need money for a motor or something like that, I do take a piece of memorabilia sometimes, and I sell it to pay for the race car, motor, parts, tires, So, fortunately, the collection's still pretty good, and I haven't had to dip really deep into it, but there'll come a day with my son. That's the most important thing. My little son, Owen. That I'm really, he comes before racing. That's a given.
And he should.
Yeah, and so I may not get to as many races as I'd like to this year, but he's also, I think he'll enjoy it. He'll enjoy the experience of doing something like I did with my dad. We didn't own a car, but we still had a hell of a good time, bonding and going to the racetrack together, which is cool, because I think back, and I was going with my dad. I know, like, I have an older son, and I know once he reached the age of 12, he didn't want to go with me anymore. But I remember going with my dad to the races till I was like, we used to go together. I was in college and even graduated, and we used to go together. So it's a good father-son thing to do. So I'd imagine I'll be in it for quite some time. Yeah.
Well, that's a good thing. And the racing community is better for it. Mike, I want to thank you for coming on the show. It was great.
Thank you, Jeremy.
I got to see furry coats in the background.
Yeah. Jimmy Snuka's trunk somewhere over there.
Jesus. Yeah. I'm not going to go through what's in your collection. I don't want to do that, but someday I want to see that collection.
Anytime.
So, thanks again, Mike.
All right. Thank you, Jeremy.
Yep.
Have a good one.
Yep. That's going to wrap up this edition of the SprintCarUnlimited.com deep dive presented by EnTrust IT Solutions. Thank you to Mike Heffner for joining the show. It was good stuff. And also, don't forget to click the subscribe button on our YouTube channel and check out our daily exclusive content at www.sprintcarunlimited.com. We'll be back next Thursday with another edition of the Deep Dive.